You're listening to Nutrition Matters Podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist. Hey everyone, it's Paige, your favorite nutrition podcaster and dietitian. Nutrition Matters Podcast explores what really matters in nutrition and health with a sensitive and realistic approach. This podcast relies on the support of listeners like you and needs donations to keep this project running. To help support the podcast, please consider making a donation at pagesmothersrd.com/podcast. If you find this episode interesting, engaging, or helpful in your life, please consider donating, sharing with friends and family, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can leave a review about this podcast straight from your podcast app. Search Nutrition Matters Podcast, click Reviews, and then write a review. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Paige Smathers RD if you'd like to have a little more food for thought. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Nutrition Matters Podcast, and thanks for being here. My name is Paige Smathers, and I'm your host. And today, I am so excited to bring you this conversation I had with my friend Jessica Clayton, who is an IBCLC, so International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, where we talk all about breastfeeding. Now, I know that for some people that topic may sound more interesting than others, but I just want you to know right up front, learning about breastfeeding and the nutrition aspects of breastfeeding, plus all the other cool things to learn about it, just was one of the most fascinating parts of my learning to become a dietitian. So this is a topic that I think is really fascinating on an intellectual level, and also really amazing on a personal level, and just on a person-to-person idea of how amazing and cool our bodies are and what they're capable of. I think that if you're listening and you're like, yeah, that doesn't have anything to do with me, or I'm not sure how this will connect to my life, if nothing else, it'll be really interesting to learn about this stuff because I know it really fascinated me. So let me just take a moment and introduce to you Jessica Clayton. She is a registered dietitian and IBCLC here in Salt Lake City. She has been doing this work for many years now, and she's really passionate about helping moms and parents and families develop connections with their babies and learn how to feed them best. And, we do give the caveat here that we don't think that every woman or every family needs to only breastfeed. We know that there are situations where that's not possible or that's not what's best, and we support people in their own choices. But yeah, the goal of this conversation is just to kind of have an interesting discussion about the idea of breastfeeding and to help understand some of the common misconceptions, and just to appreciate, one other reason to appreciate the human body even more. So with that, I'm really excited to bring you this episode, and I just want to keep all of you filled in on some things going on, a little bit of housekeeping here. So in April, which is coming up, I will be co-hosting a mindful eating workshop here in Salt Lake City. And if you're local or if you have the ability to come here, we'd love to see you for it. So check out more details about that workshop at my website, which is pagesmothersrd.com/workshop. And also join us over in the Facebook group for the podcast if you're interested in being a part of the discussion and kind of getting to know people who are on a similar journey as you. Join us over at Nutrition Matters Podcast Community on Facebook. And then, of course, if you like what you hear on the podcast and you kind of want to learn how to take things to the next level, I offer an online course that might be interesting to you, so check that out as well. You can find that at pagesmothersrd.com/course. This is a course that kind of helps you take the stepping stones to go from dieting over into intuitive eating, trusting your body, being at peace with food. Often that feels like a giant leap of faith for people to just kind of say, okay, I'm gonna do this intuitive eating thing. And so what I've done with the course is kind of taken the very same things I do with my clients and put it down
into course format to kind of help you walk through those stepping stones of how to get there rather than feeling like you're taking this giant leap of faith. So if that sounds interesting, check it out. See if it might be a good fit for you. And if you ever have any questions, I'd be more than happy to chat with you about it. Okay, well, thank you again so much for being here, and enjoy this conversation I had with Jessica Clayton all about breastfeeding. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to Nutrition Matters podcast, and thanks for being here in person. That's always fun.
I'm really excited to be here with you. It's been a while since we've seen each other.
I know. So fun. So just for everybody listening, this is my friend Jessica Clayton, who is a registered dietitian in Salt Lake City and also specializes in breastfeeding and helping women develop that bond and also continue to be able to feed their babies. So what else would you add to that? What's the IBCLC? Explain your certification.
Yeah, so I feel like sometimes I have more letters behind my name than in my name. But IBCLC stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. So it's quite a mouthful, but basically it's the highest certification you can carry when in the realm of breastfeeding and helping women learn how to breastfeed and manage lactation problems. So that's what I do. I work in a couple different places across the valley dealing with that kind of care.
And what brought you into that? What interests you about that particular population?
Yeah, so when I was in school, we spent some time at WIC, and when I was in the WIC center, I loved being around those mom and babies, and I kind of decided this really is where I feel comfortable. So I was working in a WIC clinic during rotations in school and really enjoyed being around mothers and babies. And so that's where my passion started, and kind of I was just learning about basic things like how to hold the baby when they're breastfeeding. So really basic stuff. But I enjoyed helping women find confidence in nourishing their children. So that's where it started. And of course, WIC has a huge campaign to help support breastfeeding mothers. So I had a lot of information at my fingertips there. They actually started my training and gave me my first 45 hours of education towards my IBCLC. And then I just kept moving from there. And I guess it's been about 3 years since I certified and became an IBCLC.
And if I'm not mistaken, I have to take a little bit of credit for you
going down this path, did. Right? Yeah, you were the one that sent me the email about that class. So it totally was you.
So you're welcome, Jessica. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. So what I want to talk about in this conversation is, I think, I always am sensitive to people listening who might feel like, oh, this has nothing to do with me, or they're going to talk about breastfeeding. I'm not a parent, or I'm not a female, or whatever. I'm hoping that this is interesting just as a knowledge thing, just to understand how much more it is than, okay, you hold your baby and then you put them on your boob and then there they go. There's so much more to it. There's so much complexity, so much emotion, so much pressure sometimes. And whether you're someone listening who can totally relate to this or someone who this is completely not in your realm of experience, I'm hoping it can just be really interesting, because yeah. I know I'm going to learn a lot today chatting with you about all the ins and outs of breastfeeding.
Yeah. Well, I really think it is kind of a public health issue. It's something that I hope that more and more people are exposed to, whether they're male, female, breastfeeding, formula feeding, no matter what you're doing. Learning about this is really helpful. Maybe for your own baby's health one day, but maybe for someone else in your life that you haven't even come in contact with yet.
Yeah, because there's a lot of value you can add as a support person in someone's life who's trying to care for a child too. So let's just say right up front that this is a sensitive topic sometimes, potentially, because there are people out there who want to be parents who haven't had the opportunity for whatever reason. And so I want to be really sensitive to everybody listening that we both recognize that this is a sensitive subject, or potentially could be. And then also it's really sensitive to talk about breastfeeding sometimes, because there's been lots of public health campaigns to try to increase the prevalence of breastfeeding. I don't know if prevalence is the right word, but to help women breastfeed. But then, without meaning to, sometimes that can create pressure, which can create a lot of shame and guilt if you're not able to make it happen. So, right up front, it's really important to just say, like, feeding your baby is what's most important, and supporting women who want to, choose to, or can breastfeed is kind of where we're going to focus, but we also don't want to like invalidate women who choose a different way.
Oh, completely not. And I want to 100%, I work with women from all different walks of life. And, sometimes that isn't the thing that's going to work for them. Finding their own individual success with this is important to me. And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but looking beyond like breastfeeding being a nourishment thing and how it is like involved in many different aspects of the mother's life.
Perfect. So I think we've kind of settled on some of the stuff that I know. I always try to anticipate what someone listening might be thinking. So I'm hoping we've covered some of those bases, but let's get into it. Let's talk about some of the science of breastfeeding. Just talking about, let's talk about pregnancy and what happens during pregnancy to help support breastfeeding. Any fun facts or interesting things that someone should know about the physiology that changes and the all of the different things that come together to make it so that when that baby's born, your body's kind of ready to go in that way.
Yeah, so lactation in pregnancy actually starts at about 16 weeks gestation. Some mothers might find that as they get closer and closer to their due date that they actually start to leak. Others don't, and they still have a wonderful supply, so that isn't an indication. But that's when those glands are starting to figure out what they're supposed to do. They might even start to be like growing, and so some women notice like breast change and growth, sometimes color changes. Those kind of things are indications of the hormones, things that are happening inside the body. So there's lots of different things that are happening during that time, and then, of course, all of that preparation is coming up to that point when the baby is born and then the placenta is delivered. And that placenta being delivered sends another cascade of hormones into the body system going, okay, now it's truly time to like pick it up and start making milk. So that first milk that comes is called the colostrum.
So really quick about the placenta thing. This gets a little graphic.
Sorry.
No. It's totally fine. I've given birth to 2 babies, and when you described the hormone cascade that happens as the placenta is delivered, I don't know if maybe this is just being confused with other hormones because there's a bajillion things going on with your body when you have a baby, but I can attest to feeling something really intense and crazy and weird and amazing when I delivered the placenta. Like my body just felt it was a really weird feeling. I don't know if that was hormonal or what that was, but yeah, interesting. So I've heard, tell me if this is fact or fiction, I've heard that every time a woman gets pregnant and her body starts to get ready to support breastfeeding, the body has to like remake that internal structure inside of her breast to be able to like whatever, I forget exactly what the words are, but that every single time like that structure has to be rebuilt and remade.
Yeah, so glands do shut down. I mean, if a mother stops breastfeeding before the next child comes, then there is going to be a shutdown. But in fact, there is a shutdown even for mothers that continue to breastfeed. They call that tandem feeding, but that's a whole other subject. There is some truth to that, but we do find that mothers that with their second baby, when they go to feed again, that cascade seems to happen a little faster. It's a little less crazy. So it's different with each pregnancy, but yeah, I think it's different is probably the word.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that colostrum that comes first. Talk about all of the interesting, cool science behind what that is, what that looks like. I think it's also really interesting to talk about what a baby needs and how tiny their little tummies are when they're first born, and just talk about that.
Okay, so that first milk, that first stuff that comes from at the breast really it's kind of like almost a honey consistency, this colostrum, and from a nutritional standpoint, it's really high in carbs and really high in protein, but really quite low in fat compared to breast milk when it's like fully transitioned into breast milk. And this is baby's first food. And when babies are born, they are born with really, really small tummies. Their tummies are not prepared to take very much on. But that, I tell a lot of moms this, so when we're discussing like how much does their baby need, their stomachs are about the size of a marble, like 5 to 7 milliliters. So it's really small in that first 24 hours of life. So in that first day of life, they're really only getting like an ounce for the whole day. Like they don't get very much than that. Every baby is going to be different. They're all born at different sizes. I mean, we see babies that are born that are 3 pounds and 11 pounds. That's a really wide range of like needs. But really what that food is doing, that initial colostrum, is feeding the gut. So it's preparing this totally sterile place that has now come through the mother's body, through the vaginal canal.
Which, by the way, coming through the vaginal canal also helps to get the gut ready for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
I don't know if you've seen this, but there's this really awesome video on NPR that they've done on the human microbiome. And so colostrum has a lot to feeding the microbes that are trying to establish. It's part of sealing the gut. So we talk about babies being born with kind of a leaky gut, like the cell walls aren't totally compacted and like meeting quite yet. And so it almost creates like the mortar between the bricks as baby is taking that in for the first couple days of life. So on day 2, baby's tummy starts to grow and he's starting to go like, I'm hungry now. And so they go into this feeding frenzy. It might have been hard to like wake your baby up in the first 24 hours to feed. And your nurse keeps going, you got to wake that baby up. Hey, go wake your baby up, which is really important to encourage your milk onset. But by day 2, your baby's going, okay, where's the food? It's time. And so we go through this thing that we call second night syndrome, where moms start to go crazy and they think, there's nothing in here. And I kind of tell moms, like, this is like going down the tunnel and we're just waiting to see that light at the other end of the tunnel. And we as practitioners don't always know, like there may be something with that mother that we just don't have all of the foresight. But as long as that baby is stable, we keep them on that road. We keep them going. And usually by the morning of day 3, that milk starts to come in. Now, there are a lot of contributing factors. Some of you may be wondering, like, well, my milk didn't come until day 5, or, there's lots of different things that I hear out there. So it is a very individualized thing, and there are a lot of different things that can affect, like, how soon your milk comes in. But baby's, like, starting to get ready for it on about day 3.
Okay, and let's rewind just a tiny bit. Talk about a latch and talk about what to look for. I know that's kind of hard on a podcast, but can you describe it in words? Okay.
We'll do our best. It is something that, it's one of those things that when I have clients call me, I'm trying to tell them something over the phone and I'm using my hands. I'm like, I know you can't see my hands, but when you can't get a good latch, it really is important to find someone that can give you some hands-on help.
And how important is that first latch? Because, like, I know, like, sometimes people feel like a lot of pressure to like do it right the first time or else you've ruined it
Yeah. So we find that during that hormone like cascade, like once the placenta is delivered, babies coming to the breast within the first hour of life seems to be the best thing to do to get that baby to establish breastfeeding. I mean, they are out, they are vigorous, they are ready to feed. And chances are later on that day, they're going to be more practicing, but they are not going to be as gung-ho about it. And so whether that's more on like baby side of the thing, that baby, that's when they're going to have their energy, or if that's like a key component in getting milk to start, I don't know if we totally know. And, maybe there's a lactation consultant listening to this going, yeah, we do. And I just don't know that. But they're both really important for mother and baby. It's an important bonding time. Sometimes baby doesn't latch right out of the get-go, but we just bring them to the breast and we lay them skin to skin whenever possible. Just having that connection with your baby seems to help those prolactin hormones rise in mom.
Awesome. So talk about skin to skin a little bit, as much as you're comfortable, because I think that that's a really interesting and like such a cool concept.
Okay. I love skin to skin.
Me too.
It's like amazing. It's this wonderful bonding. It's like primal. It's just so beautiful. So for those of you guys that don't know what skin to skin is, it's literally what it's saying. So you take baby, they're totally skin, like just their skin. They're not wrapped up in a blankie, and you lay them right against mother's skin. This could also be done with dad if a mom is in a cesarean section. So dad can do skin to skin too. It's it's such a good bonding thing. We've actually done studies with skin to skin with twins where one baby is like a little bit warm and one baby is a little cold, and they're both laying on mom's chest, like on each breast. And there's like a temperature difference under those, what do you call that? Like infrared technology. So one baby is getting warm while the other one is being cooled off with that skin to skin. So it helps with like control with the fever, like rhythm for your baby.
Temperature
breathing.
regulation. Isn't it help with like glucose regulation as well?
Yeah. This is like their new home. So I always tell moms, like, your baby has been living inside of you for 9 months. This is their new home, and I'm gesturing to the breasts here. So this is their new hangout spot. Make them comfortable here. They can hear your breathing. They can hear your blood. And that calming effect that skin to skin gives her baby and to the mother seems to help with glucose control. It's so bizarre. Like,
it kind of makes sense though, because it seems like it would be like an anti-stress or a calming thing, which, glucose is involved in that as well, kind of like ramps up to help you run from the bear type of idea. So, I mean, just the amount of effects that skin to skin can have, it's like really cool when you just think about it. Oh, our bodies are amazing.
Yeah, they really are.
Okay, so let's talk about, so you were saying kind of day 2 and 3, and then I said let's rewind and talk about latching. So do you feel like we've covered the concept of latch enough?
Oh, no.
Okay,
let's talk about latch. So we kind of talked about like what's happening with the milk production. Now getting baby to take that milk directly from the breast, that latch that we talk about. When I'm teaching moms about breastfeeding, I often will say we are not nipple feeding, we are breastfeeding. So encouraging moms to help baby open as wide as they can. Now, I've been doing this for a while. I've seen a few boobs. I've seen a lot. A lot.
You've seen your fair share of boobs.
And they come in all shapes and sizes. And, most women haven't, maybe they've seen like their best friend, or like maybe they've been around, maybe their mom and is really open, or sisters or something, but they usually are kind of in a low demographic of what they've seen as normal, unless they've gone out and searched and found like some comparisons. And so there are a lot of different breasts out there. And so what I help with moms is finding the best way to latch their baby with their breasts, because there really are going to be some that are really easy to latch to and others that are a little more difficult to.
Okay, what makes a breast easy to latch to and what makes a breast hard? Can you describe?
Yeah. So the nipple is kind of like the anchor. It's like something for baby to orient and find himself on. So some women have like very flat nipples. Some women have nipples that actually invert. And so it's like trying to suck onto a straight wall. Like there's nothing to like grab onto. So you can think of like if you had a bottle that didn't have a nipple, like it was just a flat surface, it would be difficult to grab onto. You'd be having to use a lot more suction. So for those moms, sometimes we use different tools with them. There's things called nipple shields out there. There are particular like ways to hold the breast that might help baby find like where they're supposed to be a little bit easier. So particularly if you don't have like everted nipples or something that it's like, okay, this is where my nipple is. It's not, maybe if it's cold outside, like you'll be a little nipple-y. If you don't have those problems, then you might want to reach out to a local lactation consultant to help you with breastfeeding. With that all being said, I think it's important to remember that we are breastfeeding. And so every type of breast out there, every type of nipple out there has the ability to breastfeed. Some of them are going to create some more difficulty though.
Okay, and I like the concept of breastfeeding, not nipple feeding, because, so totally correct me if I'm wrong. I'm obviously not, I don't specialize in this, but I've done it. So when you are trying to get your baby to latch, you want them to open their mouth nice and wide. And really what they're doing is that sucking thing that's so natural for them to do. Is it's the way it felt in my body was my babies would suck and suck and suck, and then all of a sudden I would get this like crampy feeling in my boobs, and then all of a sudden they'd get all hard, and then I could totally feel that like all of a sudden the milk would come in. And I know that that's like a super cool hormonal thing going on, but if it's just on the tip of your nipple, they're not going to be hitting on the glands that are then releasing the milk
They're
into
not
the
gonna
nipple,
give it the
right?
same
Stimulation.
Yeah, so the stimulation is different. So what you just kind of described is a letdown.
Right.
Now, there are many women that never feel that reflex.
Oh my gosh.
I've actually never felt it.
Really?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It kind of hurts.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
So some women like describe it as like a rushing feeling. Some it's like pins and needles. I've never felt it. I've had some other people just say it's like a warm sensation. They might feel like they just feel like a rushing. And so what's basically happening is that oxytocin, that love hormone, baby latches on, and like you have this oxytocin release, and that goes, okay, squeeze the milk out. And so that is pushing the milk out to your baby as well as baby drawing it out. So it's like a combined effort.
Right. Okay. So and that doesn't happen quite as well, it seems like, if the baby doesn't have like the actual breast in their mouth, right?
Yeah. So if they're just kind of at the nipple, it almost creates like a pinching sensation.
It like pinches it off rather than allowing it to flow.
Yeah.
And really, I've seen videos of like what it would look like inside of a baby's mouth, like your nipple.
Right.
Do you want to talk about that for a minute? Because it's a little maybe different than you intuitively would think.
Yeah. So it really does, it draws really far into the mouth. In fact, it's almost vital for moms like to not have pain, to have that nipple as far back into baby's mouth so that it's hitting the soft palate in baby's mouth. So it kind of, again, I can't really show you. It's a difficult thing to explain without like a visual effect, but bringing it back into the mouth as far as baby can allows baby to do a compression and suckle motion at the same time. So that creates like a better release of milk, a more copious volumes can come that way without mom basically getting a rug burn across the roof of baby's mouth if it's just not far enough in there. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think is the next thing we need to talk about? I have lots of things I could ask, but we could go into the realm of what happens when you get really sore. How do you work through that? Or what are some common struggles women experience in this early phase of nursing? And I'm also really curious, is baby number 2 or 3, should you expect similar sort of like struggling to kind of like get used to it like you did the first time, or does it get easier for most women?
Yeah. So when I'm working in my outpatient clinic and I'm working with moms after they've left the hospital, 9 times out of 10, I'm seeing moms that have problems. I'm not seeing the moms that are like, okay, is this right? Every once in a while I do, and they just need the like affirmation that, yeah, things are going right. This is the way it's supposed to happen. But most of them, they're coming in for pain. Maybe their baby's not gaining weight and they've been sent to me to figure out why, because they're trying to exclusively breastfeed. So I think I actually want to talk a little bit about like what happens when breastfeeding doesn't happen. Like maybe we don't have enough milk. Let's broach that topic first.
Great.
So like I said, there are some women that maybe on day 2, day 3, they're just not getting enough milk. Maybe their baby is still stable, and so they kind of keep pushing through, and they get to their doctor's office on day 5 or 6, and they're like, ooh, this baby's not gaining enough weight, and they ask about how many wet, poopy diapers this baby's had, and they think, I don't remember if we've changed a wet diaper today. I haven't seen a poopy diaper since we left the hospital, or, something like that. And it does happen. I mean, sometimes these women have such amounts of pressure of like, I'm going to breastfeed and nothing else, that it's a struggle. So I want to remind all the listeners here today that the first rule of breastfeeding is if it's medically indicated, we need to feed the baby. And so there are a couple mothers that I remember having in my office, and I'm like talking them off the edge of a cliff of like, formula is not going to hurt your baby. And in this instance, it's going to help your baby. Your baby needs energy. Your baby needs fluids, and he's not getting that from you quite yet. And so sometimes just letting that go, and the anxiety that some of those mothers carry of like, I'm going to breastfeed or die, and having someone to hold their hand during that time is super important. I think a lot of pediatricians, they mean well, but they just go, it's okay, like your baby's going to be fine. But for some women, that is like losing a child. Like when they can't breastfeed, or that is not a thing that's going to happen to them for whatever reason it is. Maybe there was like a problem with their breast development as a teenager that caused X, Y, or Z, or maybe there's a hormonal disorder that this mom has. Sometimes there are times that we don't have like a full idea, like a full causative reason. There's lots of things that are involved in breast development throughout a woman's life that could be an attributing factor, but we just don't. To go through all of those things and cross them off wouldn't do anything different, if that makes sense. So helping those mothers find like the happy medium of like, okay, I am going to have to mix feed my baby, or I can only produce like half what my baby needs, or maybe they're only making like an ounce or two a day. Now there are, in my circumstance, I have never found someone that doesn't make milk at all. It seems that we all make some milk, but there are some women that struggle, like they can pump and pump and feed and feed and feed, and all they can get is like 3 to 4 ounces a day.
And so you said that could be a hormonal thing,
Mm-hmm.
it could be a development thing. Do you think, like, is there any other kind of reasons to kind of list in the reasons why that could be? Is it stress or not eating enough or not sleeping enough or what?
And all of those things certainly can be too. A lot of times when it's just like a stress-induced thing and there isn't any other convoluting factors that are like hormonally or like anatomy-driven, it certainly can be a huge thing, but can usually be overcome. Like I've helped moms work through vast amounts of stress and anxiety through this postpartum period. Maybe they had the birth that they did not expect. They ended up in a crash C-section, and so they're still processing a lot of stuff after they've had that baby.
So I just want to paint the picture for anyone listening who maybe has had different experiences than what we're talking about, or who hasn't experienced this particular aspect of life. But, you know, from my perspective, I think a lot of times what happens for women is you are pregnant and you're obsessing about the birth of this baby, and in so many ways it's so exciting, but in so many ways it's super scary. You're nervous about the delivery, you're nervous about, you know, that's pretty much what you're planning for. You get the house already, you nest and whatever. But I think what happens, or at least what happened for me, was like I was mentally preparing myself for the delivery so much that I didn't really take the time to be like, okay, what's it going to be like when my baby's actually here? And I didn't really like think or plan or prepare at all for that postpartum period. And I think that can make it super hard, especially like you said, if something didn't go right, or if you are really nervous about some aspect of like maybe your baby's health, and it can just, and then the hormones, oh my gosh, there's so much going on.
Yeah. So everyone's experience with breastfeeding is way different, and I think that perfectly hits things on the head. Like we talk so much about the prep of getting that baby here that we kind of forget what happens afterwards, right? And so that's when I come in, right? I'm like, I'm here to save the day. We're going to make this better. But there are some times that moms are dealing with a lot of stuff. I still remember like even having all of the information I had before I had my own child. Like I was teaching moms about breastfeeding, and I had still not like breastfed on my own. So I remember just thinking like, oh my gosh, like I know everything that can go wrong. Like, and I didn't even have any of those other predisposing factors that like, I didn't have any thyroid issues or other hormonal problems that may be indications of difficulty with breastfeeding. And I was still just paranoid that I was going to have like no milk, that it wasn't going to come in. I was a wreck. And I remember like pumping after every time my baby fed, just to make sure that like if my baby wasn't feeding right, I was doing something. And I made milk for days with my first baby. Like I had storage in the fridge, and I still in my mind was like, I'm not making enough. It became like this obsessive thing. And now looking back on it, she's 6 now. It was kind of my postpartum depression. Like it was a little bit of PPD. That was kind of shining through, and my obsessiveness fed into my baby feeding and making sure I always had enough milk. Like,
I think that's interesting. I'm imagining how that could be really kind of like symbolic of this like deep insecurity we all have. It's like, it's my first time being a parent. I don't know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I feel inadequate. It's such a huge job to take on, and there is this fear in the back of your mind. You're like, I'm not enough, or I won't have enough, or I won't be enough. And I think it's really easy to kind of like pin that abstract fear onto like this very real like thing of like nursing a baby. And so I think maybe just some awareness of like, maybe that's what's going on for me, is I'm just feeling a little inadequate. And if I can kind of just like be gentle with myself and move forward, it's probably a lot more likely to work out than kind of like continuing to be like, I'm not enough, I'm not doing enough, you know?
Yeah, I always talk with my other clinicians. I say 50% of my job is being a cheerleader and the other half is being a clinician. So there is a lot of like being able to help moms understand that they are enough. Even for those moms that aren't making enough milk, you are enough. Like you are offering everything you can to your baby and helping them find what their new normal is with their baby and how feeding is going and how we're going to protect the milk supply that they do have. In fact, I'm working with a mom with that right now, and we're trying to find this happy balance of like, how can I live my life so I'm not pumping all the time to try and make these like very small amounts of milk that my body is willing to offer up, but still like find that bond with my baby.
So that's beautiful. And I love the idea of separating, you know, your milk production from your like enoughness as a mom. I think that's really, really important. To kind of switch gears a tiny bit, I'm curious, so with my first baby, we never got on a very good rhythm because she was not a good sleeper. So some nights she would, you know, sleep all night, which was never actually, let's be honest. But some nights she would like wake up twice. Other nights it would be like 10 times. And it was really erratic and irregular. And so my body never really knew like when does she eat and how much. And it was like such a challenge. But I guess where I'm going with this is there's a supply and demand thing that goes on. And if you can get into that rhythm, your body almost kind of knows like when it's time, and maybe your baby isn't crying yet for food, but you're like, my body's telling me it's time to feed my baby, which I think is so cool. So talk about that a little bit.
So when babies are born and we're telling moms how often to feed, and we always tell them on cue, meaning like when your baby's hungry, that's when you should feed them. Now, there are some extenuating circumstances, like if a baby's not waking up to feed and it's been a while, we should probably prompt them and wake them up to feed. But as long as usually babies eat like 8 to 12 times a day in those first couple months, and in those first couple weeks, it can be like 16 to 18 times a day. Like, it is no joke. Breastfeeding is a full-time job. Like, after you've basically been medicalized, like what other place in the world do you go into the hospital and then leave with a care, like something you have to take care of, and they're like, "Okay, see ya," and we just send you home, right?
Good luck with that.
Yeah, like the parents aren't like given the support that they need, I think, in America to like really help things move forward and to really like they're adjusting and trying to figure out how that baby's going to work with their work life, because some of them are going back to work 2 weeks after they've had their baby. Wow. Yeah, they're still bleeding. There's still like lots of stuff that mom is healing from, and they're expected to like head right back on out. Not to mention like the thing that's saying, "Hey, help me," every 5 minutes, you know? Not only is it feeding, there's lots of other baby care things that are going on during that time. So I think we kind of derailed. I'm not sure if I got where we were going, but.
So is it I guess my question was like, is it a supply and demand thing? Like, I mean, if all is going well, where, you know, your baby grows and maybe doesn't eat quite as often, but when they do, they're better at it, they're more efficient, they draw more milk out each time, and your body kind of says, okay, now instead of 4 ounces at a time, it seems like we're doing about 6 ounces. And what I think is so amazing scientifically about milk, breast milk, is it also changes throughout development of the baby, like really in alignment with what the baby needs, which is so fascinating.
Right? Breast milk is crazy.
Talk about some of the science of like what is in breast milk.
So in breast milk, there are antibodies. I mean, I could roll out this list that shows you everything that we have figured out, because formula is trying to make what breast milk already is and what we're putting in formula and that kind of thing versus what breast milk is just naturally making. And the list is like continuing to grow day by day. So it's a very individualized nutrition item. Like, we talk about personalized nutrition. It doesn't get any more personal than breast milk, right? So your body really does, like, there are some babies you're talking about, like sometimes a baby might go a little bit longer, but they still are like growing and getting what they need. Some babies are kind of like relaxed feeders. Like, they don't eat very much, and they want to eat for like a long period of time. They like draw it out, and so you're like, oh my gosh, are you ever gonna be done? And then there's some babies that are like barracuda. They're like, they get on, they get their food, and they're out, man, like they're done. And so there's this variety of babies, and I think when we look at adults too, we see the same variety. Like we see people that snack all day long. We see people that are good at being regimented of like, I'm gonna have my breakfast and then I'll maybe have a mid-morning snack, you know. There are people that like have more predictability, and then there are some people that go until they're like, I'm starving, and then they grab for like the next thing, and that's that baby that's like, I can't even calm down, I need to eat right now.
I love it. It's so true. That's really interesting to think about it that way. Like these little personalities, they just kind of come the way they come, and your job is to just try to roll with it, because it can be a roller coaster. Yeah. So breast milk is amazing. It changes as the baby develops. Hopefully your body can kind of keep up with the changes that go on, and the ideal is to kind of try to breastfeed for at least a year. At least, well, I mean, any amount of time is great, but you know, aiming for about a year. What does it look like when you start to introduce some solids to the baby? Like what tends to happen with breastfeeding then?
Yeah. So the American Pediatric Association recommends breastfeeding up to a year. And then we talk about the exclusively breastfeeding for 6 months is what they recommend. And then at 6 months, babies are introduced to some solids. Now, I think that this is good. Like, you don't have to be like their 6-month birthday. It's going to start. Every baby's going to start showing milestones of their readiness, but they're mostly there about 6 months for most kiddos. So introducing solids is more of like a play thing. Most of their nutrition is still coming from mom. And so if they're sleeping more through the night, they may be breastfeeding more during the day. I think that's one thing that a lot of moms, that as baby starts getting to like 4 months old, maybe they're sleeping a little bit better at night, but they're like, oh my gosh, you eat like all morning long. Yeah, he slept for 6 hours. Like he needs to eat again. So helping them understand that it isn't always like a constant decrease of your demand. It is when I help them look at the global of it. But anyway, so going back to those solids. So as they start those solids, some moms might be really anxious to be like, okay, I'm ready to like let go of the breast, and others that are like, no, I want to try and keep him breastfeeding as long as possible. So depending on that mother's drive, I'll kind of help guide them. So if they're just one of those moms that like, we're going to try to make it to a year, but like, I'll do what I can. I might encourage them to offer some solids before baby feeds at the breast, so that we cause that weaning process to happen just a little bit faster. They make that transition to solids. For some moms, not having like all the demand all the time may cause their milk to go down a little bit faster. Now, if a mom's wanting to breastfeed for like as long as possible, maybe they're looking at the World Health Organization's recommendations of 2 years of breastfeeding. And so they really want to extend their breast milk and that fullness as long as possible. So I'll recommend that they always breastfeed before they offer solids, because solids are more of just like an introduction of like mouthfeel. How does this play in my mouth? How do I swallow? The swallowing when we're swallowing off a spoon is actually a little bit different than the way a baby breastfeeds and bottle feeds. Those are three different things that are happening with baby's mouth and movement. And so creating coordination, textures, like just being exposed to a lot of things. And we could go into like the immunology side of like being exposed to different foods at an earlier age. Is that good? And that kind of thing during that time. So generally when I'm helping moms pick foods, a lot of first foods, I'll just say, what do you have on your plate in front of you? What would you want to offer your child? It doesn't need to be anything specific. Let's give them what you're giving to yourself, just in a more mashed up or pureed form. So it's really just working with different textures and different tastes, and seeing their cute faces like recoil when they lick their first lemon, and it's fun.
So fun. And gag and all of the things. Okay, so I'm wondering about pumping. Let's talk about pumping. Mm-hmm. So I only know my experience. I haven't worked with women who are breastfeeding, so I'll just kind of make this a bit personal here. But I felt like I had just a fine supply with both of my kids, but when when I would go to work and I would pump, I would try to pump about the same amount of times that I would have fed my baby if I were home. And I would feel so like full and like ready to like pump, and then what would happen is I would like only get a tiny amount, and then I talked to some of my other friends who were like, oh, I had to like change the bottle. I was pumping so much I just couldn't keep up with it. And is that a thing? Like are pumps very different for how they like extract the milk, and what does a woman do to like pump successfully?
So pumping is its own beast for sure. Just like you said, you know that you could feed your baby and that she'd be full, but like if you tried to pump, you'd maybe get like half of what you need, right?
Totally.
So generally that's kind of where things go. I tell moms that what you can pump is what you can pump. A lot of moms will go to pump and they'll be like, I want to see how much my baby's getting. But those are two different things. Pumping shows you how much you can pump, not how much your baby is eating. So a lot of moms, as they go back to work, it is like a constant like roller coaster. Like maybe Monday they can get enough. Maybe Tuesday they're like an ounce behind what their baby's taking. Wednesday it's like half. And by Thursday, Friday, they're like, I'll just pump because I was told to pump every time my baby feeds, but I'm barely getting anything. Then they're back with their baby on Saturday, Sunday, and they take a nursing vacation where they just nurse. They might try to pump after nursing sessions. By Monday, they're kind of back up again. Like maybe they're taking some herbal supplements to try and bolster their milk supply. And then it's just this constant roller coaster ride through every week.
Do the herbal supplements help?
So there is mixed information on that. So there are some herbal supplements that we do try and use, but there isn't a lot of like background that we can actually look from like a clinical, is this evidence-based? Is this something that truly does help? So it does get a little convoluted in that area. So if you want to do those, I always encourage moms to check in with their healthcare provider, making sure that it's not interacting with any other medications they're taking. And if they feel safe with it, to go ahead and try it. And there are just like some of the ones that we use are fenugreek, blessed thistle. There's one called goat's root, shavardi. There's all these different galactologs. I'm probably saying that wrong, but they're herbal supplements that are known to enhance milk supply from lots of different
definitely
cultures.
One of those things that you should check and make sure that
Totally.
It's not inherently harmless, right? So it's just they can interact with medications and
Oh, totally. And of course, like when you're taking any type of herbal supplement, you're taking it at much higher doses than you would like if you just sprinkled some fenugreek on a salad or in some Indian food. It's going to be at really high doses. So being aware that those could have like contraindications in your particular circumstance.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of summarize and then see where there might be some holes here. We've talked about the amazing physiology of how your body gets ready to feed a baby. And then we've talked about latch. We've talked about skin to skin. We've talked about kind of some of the basics of the science of what's in milk and the nutrition. We've talked about troubleshooting some of the things that can go wrong. Do you feel like there's some holes there? Do you feel like there's latch is a big one. Getting really sore is another one. What else would you want to add? What are some common things you see,
maybe just like summing up, like what do I need when I'm breastfeeding? Like all you need is you and your baby. Like a boob and a baby is all you need to breastfeed. All the gadgets that are out there, pumps, all that stuff, those might be necessary in particular circumstances, but most of the time, all we need is a mom that's willing to try and a baby that's ready to feed. And it happens. So having good support is probably the best thing that you can invest in. So if you're looking like, what do I need? Do I need a pump? I actually tell moms, like, figure out what your support system is. Do you have a mom that's capable to come in? Do you have a sister? Do you have a friend that can stay with you for a couple of days? Do you know where your lactation consultant or lactation help is going to be if you need that kind of thing? There are professionals, doulas out there, they're postpartum doulas that will come to your home if you want to. And they do like baby care. They may or may not be like a lactation consultant as well. But they can help with like that transition into motherhood. So just making sure that you know where your resources are, I think is the biggest thing that I could tell any mom that's listening to this right now or expectant mom. know where your resources are.
I think that's great. One other troubleshooting thing I would add, just from my own personal experience, is experimenting with positions of how you feed your baby. Don't you think that can make a big difference? And holding your baby, the way you hold your baby can alter how it feels and how they are able to draw out milk.
Yeah. So we were kind of talking before, like boobs comes in all shapes and sizes. And sometimes babies are kind of like squishy when they're all squishy. And some of them might be squished a little bit weird, and they might not like laying one way over the other. And so I remind moms that breasts are around for a reason. Like your baby is like the spindle on the clock, like the handle on the clock, and your breast is the center. And so we can lay babies in really interesting ways if we need to get that baby fed. So we talk about the classical poses of like a football hold or a cradle hold or a cross cradle hold. Those are like the terminology that we use, but in reality there are so many right ways. I've had to help a mom breastfeed right after a C-section. She was like completely anesthetized, like she was out, and so we fed baby up over the shoulder right after baby was born, and I helped dad like hold mom's breast so that we could get baby on, and baby latched even though mom was like completely under. So there are lots of interesting ways and different ways that we can get a baby fed.
That's so interesting. So, is there anything else that you want to add, or do you feel like we kind of covered some of the interesting basics for people?
Yeah, for maybe someone out there that's listening right now is like wanting just to know more about lactation, maybe you're like thinking about becoming an IBCLC, please do. We need more IBCLCs, and it's a wonderful, very gratifying profession. It takes a lot of tenderness and care. I think understanding you're dealing with a really tender and like very intimate time of a mother's life. It's so rewarding. I'm so grateful for the mothers that I've been involved with in their journeys with breastfeeding and feeding their babies in general. And I'm grateful to have been a part of their process. And there's always more to learn. I hope that we keep learning a lot more. The lactation field is like open and ready to harvest from like a clinical knowledge perspective. We want to know more. We need more clinicians that are actively involved in breastfeeding support. Even if you're not like a pediatrician, like you will have somewhere involved with a mother. Maybe you work on like like in an ICU, and you have a mother that comes in from a car crash, and guess what? She's lactating, and you need to help with that type of situation. You don't know. Like it comes in, I've seen it all over the hospital. Everywhere I work, someone gets impacted with lactation somewhere. Maybe it's just their personal experience or like something in their own personal life, but sometimes it's with someone you're caring for.
Thanks for that. That's so cool, and such important information for people to understand that tenderness and sensitivity and often a lot of pressure that women feel at this time. And I think no matter who you are, you can help support the people in your lives who may need that. And just to recognize how tough it can be, I think is like the first step, because sometimes people just like roll their eyes and they're like, what's wrong with you? Why is that so hard? But there's just so much to it. So hopefully we kind of covered that a little bit today. So Jessica, take a second to talk about how people can get in touch with you. Do you do, I know you do in-person sessions, but also like if someone's not in Salt Lake or Utah, do you do stuff via Skype, or how does that work?
So I've done it a few times. Most of my consults are hands-on, like I'm doing them in my local vicinity in the area I serve, but I have done some Skype calls. So my website is breastfeedingbond.wix.com/lactation. I know that's super long, but we're just building that out now. Anyway, I've done some like guest speaking at a couple of places, and workforce services, like that kind of thing, like helping workplaces adapt to like help breastfeeding moms. We're in this awesome little part of the valley that is growing substantially in the workforce. And so all of these new tech companies that are coming up that employ like a lot of young women, and they want to help moms make that adjustment. So like figuring out like should we offer on-site childcare so that that mom can breastfeed a little bit easier? Should we have
I
pumping
would
rooms?
have killed for that.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
So I'm so grateful for these like moguls that are coming up, and like they're building these huge, powerful companies that are aware of like how the workplace is impacting women and their ability to like nourish and take care of their babies. So when pumping like isn't an option, how can we make work for that mom in particular? Could she work from home a little bit longer, or, you know, have access to her baby just a few more hours a day, something like that. So I'm really, I do a lot of things. Most of my care is like hands-on with moms, like one-on-one, which that's where my passion is. That's where I love to be. But I'm really a big advocate for like increasing like public awareness and writing policy for workplaces and that kind of stuff too. So.
Yeah, and helping companies support women. I think that's an amazing skill to have, and so cool. That's awesome. So breastfeedingbond.wix.com. I'll link to that. I'll make sure people can find that. So thanks so much, Jessica, for being here. And I hope that everybody listening got something out of this. I know I did. And it's just such a fun thing to talk about. So thanks for being here.
Good. Well, thanks for having me. Hopefully it was a good wide variety of what breastfeeding is. We've touched a few things. So thanks.
Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.